What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome back for some more Fire Emblem Heroes. This time I'm going to be taking a look at the weapon refines that we have got this month for Sigurd, Seliph, Arvis, Saias, Rhajat, and of course Effie. And I'm going to be doing an in-depth analysis on these weapon refines, and I'm also going to be providing you guys with a lot of builds. So with that said, let us begin, and I hope you guys all enjoy. Arvis and Saias, the ploy boys that we got as free-to-play units, have got their weapon refines finally, and their weapon refines are just identical. They have got the same weapon essentially, so I'm going to be covering both of them at the same time, even though they do have different colors, and I will go on about that later on in their builds. The primary effect of this weapon has got really good, and the area effect is extremely large, and unlike before, it doesn't really check resistance. This is basically an unconditional debuff. There is really no way to avoid it unless you are outside of their range, and there is a fair bit of misconception in the community regarding the phrasing of this. So this is the actual area which Arvis and Saias can cover with their weapon. So you could see for both vertical and horizontal maps, the area is just so huge, and they can cover both ways basically and debuff a lot of foes, and this is extremely powerful and it's just so versatile. It's much better than before where they just had a ploy, and now they don't really have to do that anymore. The area they cover with the debuffs is just absolutely amazing, and it's so good for support, and it's really easy to position them to get the debuffs on the units that you want to attack on and get the effect out of the weapon refine. So that is the visualization of the area they can cover for their debuffs. And their weapon refine is basically the broadleaf fan effect that Matthew and Ursula have in their weapon as well. So it seems like any kind of old unit we have, they just get this kind of weapon refine, which definitely gives them really good damage output. And with the innate debuffs which War God's Tome and Wall Flame have, it's really good effect. Ursula doesn't really have this kind of thing. She has to depend on her allies or her skills to provide the debuffs, but Arvis and Saias can debuff 2 stats with their tome itself, and that is just really amazing. Now you could easily run smoke skills like defense smoke or speed smoke on them, and support partners like Aversa, Layla, who can spread the debuffs first and then swap places with them, or sabotage speed users like Plumeria, for example, that we have got as an Astro Mythic, are going to be really good partners with Arvis and Saias. So the unconditional debuffs that they can provide is just absolutely invaluable as a support unit, and through that they can also have really powerful damage output. Broadleaf fan effect is not to be underestimated whatsoever. It can even make someone like Matthew, who has got pretty low attack stat, a pretty big threat, and he can have monstrous damage output out of it. So having this kind of effect on a mage is definitely pretty good, because on average in this game, units have got less resistance than they have got the defense, so that definitely adds to their advantage. Arvis is red colored mage and Saias is blue color, and it's mostly going to be depending on your team composition and which color you prefer and what kind of scenario game mode. I personally just overall prefer Arvis compared to Saias, so that's just my preference. And let's go over their builds. I'm actually going to be showing both builds for both of these units. They have pretty similar stat spread overall, so there's really not much difference there. And if you just want to use them at Unmerged, they could still be used because of their unconditional debuffs. That is going to be really good in Arena Assault, and they can provide pretty good damage output if you just run double Death Blow. And you could have a Breaker Skill in their slot B as well to just check certain kind of enemies. And of course, Speed Smoke is going to be a pretty good slot C skill that you could have on them because they get attack and resistance debuff from their weapon. So Speed Smoke in slot C is really good. Defense Smoke could also be run, but overall Speed Smoke is going to be a bit better. And at a max investment, you could definitely go for a speedy build where they can have a speed boosting skill like Swiss Power 3 or attack speed push 4, and just have a standard mage build. And you could also use them with Fury and just go with the ploy skill in slot C, which is going to be speed ploy here. So Fury could be used for that. And a lot skill is of course going to be stacking up with the visible debuffs they can provide with their weapons, so that is another option. And they are particularly really good in Ether Raid's offense, just like any other broadleaf weapon user really. I personally use broadleaf fan Soth, and I would definitely say that having a colorless unit with that kind of weapon is much better than having a colored unit like Arvis or Saias, but nonetheless their damage output is still going to be pretty good. So they can just run close counter Vantage or close fall Vantage and basically have Heavy Blade and Miracle. Now, a broadleaf fan user can already reach such a high amounts of damage output that they don't necessarily need a special. You could instead invest in something like Heavy Blade and charge up your Miracle to mainly survive like hardy bearing units even. So that is the strategy with Miracle and Heavy Blade, because the penalties do add to their attack stat. So that is going to be incredibly good. The problem I have with Arvis and Saias when compared to other broadly fan users is basically the fact that they're pretty frail. They don't have the highest HP, and that is going to be a big detriment at times, because you're going to be getting hit by Tactics Room, you're going to be getting hit by Panic Manner. So HP really is important in Ether Raids for avoiding those kinds of structures. And they're not the bulkiest unit when it comes to their defense stat, and they're also not the fastest unless you have some kind of sabotage speed support. So in their first initiation, it is going to be a bit hard for them to double. So that is going to be the cons of running Saias and Arvis as a Vantage Sweeper, but they do have a lot of damage output if that's what you want. And of course they could be used in Ether Raids defense as well with speed defense rules, and you could run Steady Impact or ARD skill, and basically, you know, it's pretty flexible if you want to run them on a mixed team or want to use them in Infantry Pulse team. So your team layout definitely matters here. Something like a T layout could definitely work out if you want to use a build like this. And Rue skill are going to be really good because they can provide debuffs to all stats using the Rue skill. And guard status is also going to be pretty annoying for a lot of players who are going to be challenging your defense team, because they're not going to be able to charge up their healing specials most of the time. Divine Tyrfing was one of the earlier weapons that we had in the lifespan of the game, which had damage reduction, and it finally got a weapon refine. And Seliph can also access this weapon refine with Divine Dew, similar to how Eliwood can access Blazing Durandal of Brave Roy. So for Sigurd, this refine doesn't really have much synergy with this exclusive slot B skill, Crusader's Ward. But still, this weapon refine is good nonetheless, and the primary condition is pretty much the same. You have got extra 3 resistance, and you also reduce the damage from foes' first magical hit by 50%. And we have got an additional effect which can give them 5 attack and defense during the combat if they are above 50% health. And this is not a very hard condition to maintain a lot of times by having good allies or by running healing specials. And the refinery part actually has a mistranslation in game. I have fixed it here on my screen. So at start of combat, if the foe's HP is above 50%, then they get +5 attack and +5 defense during combat, and they can make a guaranteed follow-up attack. So this is just huge because the auto follow-up attack allows them to have a player phase, which wasn't possible before this, and it also frees up quicker post, which they would require in enemy phase. So that is just really good in giving them flexibilities, and it just opens up so many options. And this essentially gives them +10 attack and defense, which is pretty easy to meet with its conditions. You just need to be above 50% HP yourself to get the half of that, and then you want to have the foe be above 50% HP, which is also pretty easy to do a lot of times. And even if you have chipped away the HP of the enemy, it can still work as long as they're above 50%, so it's pretty flexible in that regard, and just gives them very good damage output and insane defense with that extra +10 defense. They've also got damage reduction for the first magical hit, and for Sigurd, it is going to be Crusader's Ward, which is going to be really good. Now, Seliph can be slightly better user of this weapon refine because of being easily mergeable and also having access to infantry exclusive skills, which Sigurd does not have access to. But Sigurd does have his niche with Crusader's Ward, so there are a few things that he could do that Seliph cannot, and there are definitely many things which Sigurd cannot do but Seliph can because of being an infantry unit. I'm a big fan of Sigurd and Seliph both, and I do have a +10 merge Seliph. In my opinion, this weapon refine is really amazing. The extra attack and defense is really good with the damage reduction, and the auto follow-up attack is just the cherry on top, which is what they required, and it's just so easy to me. They can be away from the allies, they could be near allies and still get the auto follow-up, which is really amazing. I'm going to be taking a look at the builds of Sigurd first, then I'm going to move on to Seliph. So he's a 5-star logged unit, and he's a Gen 1 cavalry unit, so he's going to be hard to get, but he is going to be getting those reruns. But here we have the first budget build. Unfortunately, we don't have the best budget mixed phase options, and Fury doesn't really have the greatest synergy with Divine Tyrfing. So you could just go with the default slotted skill that he has got and just have attack defense solo and just make him into a melee tank basically on a budget. And if you want to invest more into him, then a solo skill is going to be absolutely amazing for Sigurd because he's a cavalry unit. It's pretty easy for him to get away from his allies, and attack defense solo can be combined with speed rest solo. And a healing special is always going to be nice for maintaining the condition of his Divine Tyrfing. And the auto follow-up is absolutely amazing and makes him pretty much into a red legendary Ephraim, who's much better actually, because legendary Ephraim's condition can be pretty restrictive at times, but Sigurd has got much flexible condition for getting the auto follow-up, which means that he can be a Gale Force unit by running Heavy Blade and Slaughter, because he already gets so much attack from Divine Tyrfing, and by running Quick and Pulse, that can become a 4-turn Gale Force. On budget, you could obviously run Heavy Blade 3 and something like Wings of Mercy, which could work out. But if you want to invest a bit more, then Heavy Blade 4 is going to be really good with a lull skill. If you want to invest like Plus and Merge into him, then here are some of the builds. And Distant Foil is actually a pretty good option for Sigurd, and he's one of the better users of it, because what that allows you to do is basically take on these bow units and dagger units, what Sigurd can definitely take on with his extremely high defense with Divine Tyrfing, and he cannot really retaliate back to magical units, so that allows him to reduce the damage of their double attacks by Crusader's Ward. And ideally, you want to speed stack on your Sigurd to make him tanky and make it harder for the opponents to double. Now, of course, you have the damage reduction with Crusader's Ward as well, but keep in mind, against melee units, he doesn't really have any kind of damage reduction, so not getting doubled by the enemies is always going to be really good for any kind of tank instead of reducing the damage. If they don't really get doubled, then they don't really take the damage from the second hit to begin with. So, in my opinion, speed stacking is definitely the way to go for a high investment Sigurd, and you should definitely go with plus speed IV. That is definitely his best IV in my opinion with this weapon refine. This encounter has always been a bit awkward with Crusader's Ward, but Distant Foil definitely can do the job where he's more susceptible to magical units, and there he could reduce the damage. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to retaliate back. But if you want to retaliate back with them, then you could run Distant Counter and have Mystic Boost. Mystic Boost has pretty good synergy with Divine Tyrfing's effect to keep him healthy, and Distant Counter just allows him to deal with mages, and he can reach pretty good amount of speed with Speed Rest Solo. And basically, the aim with Sigurd is to just make him fast enough that he doesn't get doubled. He already gets auto follow up from his Divine Tyrfing, so that is good enough. So you don't really need to be as fast to double attack someone, but just to avoid doubles, and this is going to be more than enough in my opinion for a lot of the threats. And you could also use him in Ether Raid's offense actually in the Astro season. You could use him in Light season as well, but Bramimond is going to be a really big problem because Sigurd does not have access to null follow-up. So Bramimond is just going to pop him up if he's not running Crusader's Ward, and Crusader's Ward will have awkward synergy with this encounter. So Astro season could be done, and he could be speed stacked by running Plumeria and by also having support of Brave Lucina. Duma could be a bit annoying at times because you will not be able to reduce damage from him, but the auto follow-up is going to be able to pierce through his Fell Breath because Sigurd is going to be much faster than Duma, so that is something that he could do. And at last, you could also make him an Ether Raid's defense frontliner. Now, there are not really a lot of cavalry units who could successfully do this, but Sigurd is one of them because of Crusader's Ward. And he can get really fast by running ARD speed res. He basically can get 10 speed and 10 resistance, and that can just make him so stocky at max investment. Unfortunately, a lot of people do already run Eliwood, so it could be hard for many people to incorporate him in their team. But if you want a bulky cavalry unit who can hardly lunge like Eliwood, but you just want a stocky one, then Sigurd is your option. And now let us take a look at what Seliph can do with this Divine Tyrfing of his father. So for the budget build, you could just run double sturdy stance, just make him a melee tank for budget, as I said with Sigurd as well for the budget build. But many people already have very highly merged Seliphs or plus and Seliphs, so in that case Divine Tyrfing is definitely really amazing, and I'm definitely going to be using the second build myself. So speed stacking is really important, as I said in Sigurd's part. And I will once again reiterate, the reason why we speed stack is because we don't want to get doubled, especially with Seliph who doesn't have Crusader's Ward. So you reduce the damage of magical foes first hit by 50%, and then if you cannot get doubled, then that is amazing for your longevity. And that is how I've been using even vanilla Divine Tyrfing so far, and it has worked out fantastic, as you've seen in my videos. So speed stacking is extremely important with Divine Tyrfing, cannot stress that enough. And Seliph can easily do that in the light season with Peony, and Seliph has got amazing matchup chart against all of the mythic units in the dark season. Yune, Bramimond, he could just not care about him with null follow up. He avoids that kind of double, and also Hell, and Sothis is not really that big of a problem whatsoever, even though she's a dragon, because Seliph is stocky enough. So as much of a meme speed Seliph can appear to be, he's actually genuinely really good with Divine Tyrfing, and Brave Lucina support definitely makes it really better. And Astro Season could also use Seliph. You could run Nulsi actually if you don't want to have Null follow-up, or if you just don't have it. So in the Astro Season you could definitely run that, and this can be really helpful in dealing with those annoying Dazzling Staff units and also Fire Sea Weapon users. Again, not getting doubled is going to be really important, so you want to have like something like double drive speed on Lucina mainly, because Seliph has got plenty of attack already and plenty of defense, so he mainly needs speed for this kind of tank build, and Brave Lucina should provide that. And then you could also use him for some other builds. Once again, Distant Foil is going to be good. He doesn't have Crusader's Ward like his father, but we could have a bootleg version of that and deflect magic, and by doing that, we are basically following the same strategy as I went with Distant Foil Sigurd. So you're going to be able to easily take care of those dagger and bow units because you have insanely high defense, especially with Distant Foil added as well. And the mages that threaten you, who can double you easily, you're going to be reducing damage from their first hit with Divine Tyrfing, and then reduce the damage with deflect magic. So that could be done. And you could also run him with Mystic Boost. Again, it does have pretty good synergy with Divine Tyrfing, and we're just speed stacking on him. You could also run a tier 4 stand skill for the guard effect and run Special Spiral, which is something Sigurd cannot do. So Special Spiral with Soul can just allow you to retaliate back with Souls to just make sure that he's always healthy in the Divine Tyrfing range, and something like this could definitely be useful in many of the in-game content when you combine it with Deflect Magic Sacred Seal. So Deflect Magic is actually a pretty nice underrated option for Seliph in my opinion. Rhajat was a really irrelevant unit before this. She was just a green pity breaker and no one really used her too much, and it was really hard to merge her up because of how rare she was. But she just absolutely becomes such a unique unit with this weapon refine. In my opinion, Rhajat is by far the sleeper unit of this batch, and she's actually pretty amazing. Now, her weapon refine does not make her the most powerful unit magically, but it helps Rhajat stand out and be unique. This kind of effect is going to be something that not a lot of units in future are even going to be having, so this definitely kind of future proofs her and gives her a pretty amazing niche. So Obsessive Curse has got the cavalry effectiveness, which can be useful many times, and the other effect is inflicting -5 speed and resistance debuff on foes within 2 spaces during the combat. So this kind of effect is pretty common nowadays. We have seen this on Kyria, we have seen on Tharja's weapon refine herself, and it seems like it runs in the Tharja family in a sense, quote unquote. The refined part of this weapon is really interesting. It gives her 7 splash damage, which is dual phase actually, which is amazing for versatility. And in player phase, you could run double Savage Blow and just have 21 splash damage, which is absolutely amazing. And now we move on to the crispy part. She can also inflict flash status with her weapon refine, which is extremely good for supporting and gives her a really unique niche. She's essentially a ranged Kemph, which is not really all that bad. She's also an infantry unit, so she does have access to infantry only skills, and she can of course fit on infantry pulse teams. Kemph is a melee range unit, and Rhajat is range unit, and being a range unit, it's a bit easier for her to apply these kinds of debuffs. Now, I know many people might say that this is kind of underwhelming because even healers can do that. What is unique, they can also have access to flash, but keep in mind, literally no healer can have access to this splash damage and flash at the same time, effectiveness against cavalry unit, which might not be that big of a deal. But even then, the fact that she can inflict -5 speed and resistance debuff within 2 spaces of her is really good. And healers cannot use offensive specials like Rhajat can, so that is another thing that she has got. Even though these kinds of effects are of healers, she can do it a bit better because she's an offensive unit clearly, and she doesn't really have to occupy her slot B by running like Wrathful Staff or anything like that. She could just run a lull skill or something else. So Rhajat has got way more flexibility than a healer, and she can definitely be a bit more threatening than a healer when it comes to her damage output at least. The place I see her being most useful is Aether Raid's defense, where she could be a really annoying unit by inflicting that flash status and by also having the splash damage. And also in Arena Assault, even as an unmerged unit, she can easily provide this kind of just support to your team. Just disable the counter attacks of the enemies with that flash status, and you could just go in with your dancers and your nukes and just destroy those Arena Assault units. So those are the two places where Rhajat is going to be finding a lot of use in. Rhajat is a 5-star locked unit, and she's an extremely rare unit, so I don't really expect people to have high merges of her. So even as an unmerged unit, she could be used in Arena Assault for her utility. As I said, you could just run double Savage Blow, which is going to be really amazing stacking up with the splash damage of her Tome. And you could run Poison Strike, or you could run Wind Sweep or Water Sweep. Water Sweep is present on Soren, and Wind Sweep, you could get that from Grails. So again, those kinds of things are going to be pretty easy to do, and that allows you to safely apply the flash status, which could be really useful for Arena Assault for counter picking. Now, as I said, she's amazing in Ether 8's defense. She is actually going to be a pretty scary unit and really annoying unit to face. Now, she's not really as powerful as a Mage Nuke, but her role is basically to apply the flash status. And what this does is that if you have an opponent who just puts their tank like Brave Hector or Brave Edelgard in the range of your entire team, Rhajat can just apply the flash status. And keep in mind, Rhajat does not even need to win the combat to apply the flash status. Even if she dies, she can still apply the flash status as long as she hit the opponent. So that is the only prerequisite. So for example, if they have Park, that kind of tank, in the face of their team, Rhajat can apply the flash status. The tank cannot counterattack unless they have got null counter disrupt. And the tank is not going to be able to heal up HP, because a lot of times these kinds of tanks in Ether raids depend on Noontime Soul and stuff like that. And then your other nukes can just go in, get danced, and just consecutively attack that tank. And the tank is not going to be healing up any kind of HP. So that is just really good. And this could also work if you're facing any kind of Vantage Sweeper. This is basically going to be a soft check to Vantage basically because of the flash status. The first build is a budget build. I'm actually testing Rhajat myself in my own Ether 8's defense team because she's just so interesting. So you could have Vantage, and that could work out if the Bolt Tower goes off and the enemy tries to snipe off your Rhajat. So by having Vantage, she is going to be able to hit the opponent and apply the flash status right there. An impact skill with quite a bit of investment, if you are able to get merges or you just got pity broken, could be done with something like Steady Impact, and this can allow her to not lose and not die because she's really frail, and actually even win some matchups and just be overall really annoying. And by running Panic Smoke, you're applying flash status and also panic effect, which is just really good. And you could also run a Wind Sweep build with her. Again, this is going to be a nice soft check to Vantage, and against most kinds of tanks, she is going to be able to easily pass the Wind Sweep check by Phantom Speed, Attack Speed Push 4, and the Speed debuff from her weapon. So this can just allow her to easily have the flash status. And Wind Sweep can also be pretty helpful to make sure that Rhajat can just attack first and just apply the flash status, and then all of your other team members can just go at the opponent. So Wind Sweep is also another option. There are actually many options you could do with her. You could even use Wings of Mercy like ARD attack speed or ARD speed resistance. There are definitely a lot of options. And you could also use her in Ether 8's offense, surprisingly. Now, the main thing that you have to keep in mind is that you want to snipe healing towers. That is going to be the main counter to this kind of strategy. So against a kind of team that has got easily snipeable healing tower, this could be done because she could just have so much splash damage with double Savage Blow and her weapon. And her weapon also has like dual phase splash damage. So even in the enemy phase, she could reduce the HP of the opponents and basically just Vantage Sweep. But she's pretty frail, so you want to make sure that she can actually get into the Vantage range and snipe the healing tower. So not the most powerful Vantage Sweeper, but definitely quite interesting. And if you're a big fan of Rhajat, then you could definitely go with a max investment build with Swiss Power 3 and Loud Speed Resistance. Effie is one of those Gen 1 armor units that a lot of people have built, and even I have built up Effie. She was one of the first plus 10 units that I made, mainly for arena scoring actually, and here she is getting her weapon refined in a day and age where Gen 5 cavalry units have got the same BST as Effie. So this weapon refined just leaves the absolute filthiest taste in my mouth because it's just so disappointing. The primary effect is dual phase. It's really good for that factor. But it's conditional again, so she needs to be above 50% health to trigger it, and it's good with her already high attack stat for just nuking and deleting units. And the weapon refinery part is the absolute disappointing part of this whole batch really, because it only works once per phase, and it's essentially a conditional flowing lance that is much worse. So during the first combat of her player phase or enemy phase, she could inflict -5 attack and defense debuff on the foe, and she can also neutralize foes' bonuses to attack and defense. So it's basically a lull attack defense in a sense, what we have in Flowing Lance. But it only works once per phase, which is not ideal because as an armored tank, Effie needs to tank on multiple units in the same turn, and because of that, it really doesn't help her, because even if you use her in player phase, like nuke something with Effie and her high attack stat and you dance her, then she's not going to be getting the debuff on the foe or the lull effect really on the foe if she gets danced on her second combat, even in the player phase. So this is really annoying, and as someone who uses Effie, I would say that Barkut's Lance, Quarterly Lance are just much better options. There are so many other lances which are gonna be better than this and are gonna be more consistent. Consistency is where this lance really lacks, and it just has conditions for no reason. Like, why make this kind of conditional lull effect? Why she cannot have it all the time active? Why have the +6 attack tied to a condition? And keep in mind, this is happening after Brave Hector that we got last month. That has got like 6,000 effects built into his weapon, and he doesn't even have the armor weakness. So that is the really disappointing part of Effie, because an unmerged Brave Hector is going to be giving you more value than your heavily invested max investment Effie at +10 merge. That's how good Brave Hector is, and that's how disappointing Effie can be even at max investment with this kind of weapon refine. Really doesn't change too much for her, in my opinion. The best thing about this weapon refine is the fact that if you use Effie in your arena core, then she no longer needs to run a tier 4 slotsy skill for max arena scoring, so that is definitely pretty good. So you could run something like a smoke skill or even armor march, so that is amazing if for the people who still use her in their arena core. But after this weapon refine and the way BST creep has been going in the game, if you haven't already built up a +10 Effie, I wouldn't recommend you to build her up because she's really outdated, and as I said, something like unmerged Brave Hector is going to be much better. Something like even low merged Hector is going to be much better than a max investment Effie at this point. So if you want to run a budget build on her still, if you just have one copy of her, you could run the standard build that she has got, Deathblow Weary Fighter with Armor March, Sacred Seal, and still hit really hard. And at max investment with plus attack IV with premium skills, she can be just a delete button essentially. So that's basically Effie's job. She just hits something, it dies, and that's it. Effie's done for that phase essentially. That's how Effie works with this weapon refine, so this just capitalizes on that. You could run the standard distant counter Vengeful Fighter build, and you could also run a mixed phase build because she does get attack in both phases with her primary effect and also the weapon refine part, so that could be done. And new fighter skill in Slick Fighter is definitely pretty amazing because Effie's high attack is going to be attracting a lot of chill attacks and stuff like that, so Effie can ignore that with Slick Fighter and also have a guaranteed follow-up attack. And for cooldown reduction, you could use Heavy Blade, and you could use any of those builds honestly by slapping Ether and a dual rally skill on her if you want to use her in arena. But you could also run her in arena with Crafty Fighter, which does have the guard effect built into it, and she can basically have Ether charged up for the next combat if she gets doubled and she doubles the foe, which could be used to heal up a lot of HP and just blow something off. So those are the builds which Effie could run if you already have a +10 Effie. But overall, I'm pretty disappointed with Effie. Definitely was looking forward to her weapon refine. She is one of the last Gen 1 armor units to get it, and unfortunately it is not really all that amazing. So that is going to be it for this weapon refine review. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and make sure to share this video with your friends who are looking forward to building these units with these new weapon refines. And I want to thank all of my YouTube members for their constant support. It really means a lot. And if you enjoyed, then please be sure to leave a like and a comment, helps me tremendously. And be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because the disappointment I get out of YouTube sub boxes is the same as Effie's weapon refine. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.